we stopping for?
I know, my guys.
I guess we're late to the party. Where's the LT? Hang it right up here.
A BashAndSlash.com presentation.
RPG, Mike 12! Second floor! Stay away from the first floor!
Welcome to Bash, everyone. This is Jock of BashAndSlash.com. Let me once again remind you that Bash is brought to you by the fine folks at the #1 Ventrilo server provider, Typefrag.com. If you want to optimize your chances of success playing FPS online, you need to get on a Vent server and communicate with your fellow players. Typefrag will hook you up with one. Go to Typefrag.com and use the coupon code BASH. You'll be glad you did. Today we continue our series of casts highlighting the staff working on Battlefield 3. Today we have the prolific audio director, Stefan Strandberg. Welcome to another special edition of Bash. This is Jock of BashAndSlash.com, and today we again focus on the folks who bring you Battlefield. The latest incarnation of this franchise, Battlefield 3, will be coming at us in late fall of this year. It's currently being feverishly worked on in Stockholm, Sweden by its developers, DICE, and we have a member of that team from DICE here with us. Let's get to that guest right away. As someone who really appreciates the creative arts behind sound design, I have to say I'm very excited to talk to this gentleman. I remember wanting to speak to him after only 10 seconds of listening to Battlefield Bad Company 2. Yes, I said listening, not seeing. Though the game looked great, it sounded even better. The team that built that soundscape in BFBC2 went on to win a raft of awards. The 2010 BAFTA, GameSpot's Best Sound Design Award, the Game Audio Network Guild Award for Sound Design. And now, here is that team's audio director, Stefan Strandberg.
Oh my God, what an introduction. That was awesome. Was that me you were talking about?
The trumpets and the timpanis couldn't make it into the studio, but I have to tell you, I mean, that introduction into Battlefield, Bad Company 2, I remember to this day, and if you read posts and forum posts of people, remembering, recollecting playing that game, almost everyone will tell you the same thing. The sound just blew everybody away. I'm so honored to have a chance to talk to you.
Oh, I'm honored to be here. And it's so funny you should mention forums and stuff like that. And just talking out to the community, it's something we really appreciate them being so vocal about these things. And so I've seen and I've been blessed by a lot of those guys out there, all the gamers just enjoying sound and just saying it out loud on forums. It's nice to have it in reviews and getting prizes and stuff, but just reading forums sometimes, almost all of them are negative in many ways. Like there's always this negative vibe on forums with people complaining about different aspects of different games, whatever it might be. But it's so funny with the sound for Bad Company 2 that it was so appreciated. It was hard to find people who disliked anything with it. I think there is something extremely powerful with sound, and I think we got something really right in that game. So we're proud of it, and so it's funny to speak to you, and honored to be here.
It's sound in movies and in games sometimes gets overlooked. If it's done right, it feels so natural you don't even notice it.
Yeah, and I want to tie into what you just said there, because that's also a philosophy in itself. The thing, if it's done right, you don't notice it, and that's what you said.
Right.
But then there might be key moments in a game where you're interactive with the game, where there actually was something awesome happening, and it was the sound that amplified that specific event. Or to get to the point where we're happy, we have to take a couple of steps back, and then so we analyze a lot in the initial stages of making sounds. We try not to over-construct. 90%, I would say, of making a game or audio for a game is just getting all of those expected sounds to be there. Like the player expects when he or she does this, he or she expects this sound to be there. And I think we had, just as a basic foundation, we had a very good foundation of just natural sounds in there. And when you have that layer, that's when you can start painting with the cooler colors, so to speak. And that's so we had the original game as a foundation, Battlefield Bad Company 1, which was a lot of trial and errors and testing out stuff. And then moving on to the second one, we actually had a game already there. So polish is something not to be underestimated in terms of game development. Like, if you have time, which we did have for Bad Company 2, we were really, really eager to just use that time in the best possible way. And then we started analytically just providing all the sounds into the engine and going out, recording a lot, but never forgetting about what it is that actually plays back, and also embracing fact that sounds are everywhere, and we started to dilute a lot of our old sayings and old when you're a sound group, you get your own rule sets together with this group, and after a couple of years you need to rewrite your rules, and so that happens every time we...
Let me explore where those rules came from. I mean, I've heard on a few occasions, I've heard you say in interviews that there are 3 prerequisites for someone wanting to work in your field. Imagination, passion, and analytical skill. I wanted to explore those traits for a second because you clearly demonstrate them. How did you get a passion for sound design? Where did the passion for sound come from?
The passion, I think that's a passion towards games in general. Like, I'm passionate about the products that we make. So I think I have to like the game I'm working on. If I like it, I don't even notice that I work on it. It's like I'm just there, and I everything that I do I just breathe and eat the game that I'm working on. If I like the product, and I've been fortunate to be working on those games here at DICE. Like, from the very first game I did here at DICE was Rally Sport Challenge 2. I was so into cars back then. And initially I wasn't, but if you can ignite that spark in someone, it doesn't. It actually didn't really matter what discipline I was working in, but I was really challenged by just engines back then, and that I was passionate about engines, and I needed to make that game.
Was that about 8 years ago or so?
Yeah.
About 8 years. Okay. Cool. But you're also a musician, right? Do you need to have a musician's ear to be good at what you do?
Not necessarily, but it helps. I think there's a lot of editing made where timing is something that I'm more to this day, more and more believe that timing is a bigger thing than I initially thought, as in rhythmic perception, both when it comes to sound, but also to game pacing when making narratives and stuff like that. That I think that's where sound designers are actually better than many game designers, or because they hear an event in a certain pace, so they can block out a certain moment in a game with just audio, because they hear, he runs out of this cliff, he jumps, and then he pulls his parachute cord, and then he shoots the gun, and then he lands, and there's rhythm in how you would make a sound for a moment like that. Right. And if you start with the sound, you can actually get a better you as a human being, you're sensitive to stuff when it's not rhythmic. I'm not saying that games are a beat like a techno song, but there's something to rhythmic composition that is easier for sound designers to relate to than for people not working in this field. So we are trying here more collaborative work now, where it's the sound designers are working with the mission designers in creating certain moments in the game, with sound being the leading discipline for just on the sketch phase.
How do you learn? How do you go to learn to create soundscapes? I mean, how did you learn this craft? Was it on the job, or did you take training? Or
I'm a self-taught person, and so I think that's one of the big benefits actually, because I was never bogged down with technical. I've always been, my tools have been quite simple, and I don't, as I said, I don't believe in crafting or constructing too much, which I think is a common misconception as well, that sound designers, as they manipulate sounds. No, that's wrong. No, I don't do that, at least that much. I could probably benefit from doing that more, but I'm not doing that as much as I think people think. I'm more into getting it the right sounds rather than and then specifically getting the right sounds to play back at the right time.
Right.
If that makes sense. And,
right.
And collecting, that's, I've mentioned this before as well. It's not, that's just one part of it, of course, getting the right sound. And we're good at that, I think. We're really careful when it comes to the craft. And your initial question was about how did I learn? I don't know. I maybe learn. For me, it's about trusting what I believe that I like. That is my skill. I don't know. So I mean, learning the tools, that's not very hard. But I think on a daily basis, there are several things you can be good at. I'm working with people. So that's one thing, a people skill, that's really important. And then there is the craft skill, also important.
How important is the technical side of it? I mean, to me, especially now in the digital age, being an audiophile or working in audio just must seem like incredibly daunting because of all the technical things that you need to...
Yeah, I think every time I meet people in the movie industry or like people working with film, they get completely baffled or when they see how complex it is, because it's not about track laying like a movie with a linear soundscape. So it's more like building buckets of sounds that work together. And then there are of course places in a game which are similar to movies in terms of how they're made and played back. But for a Battlefield game, it's more about providing the game with the components. So, and then the monster lives by itself. The Battlefield is played back. The sounds are generated by players. If we're talking multiplayer, so there's a soundscape that we can't control, but we can in a way. But we provide the building blocks, and that's where I think we've been successful in being extremely balanced and real. And
well, we're going to get to those
deep. We've been deep. Like there's a deep layer of recognition and believability in our sounds.
Right.
That's.
I'm going to get to that believability because I wanted to get back to BFBC2 for a second. I remember I wasn't kidding when I said I wanted to talk to you because I remember getting into that game in multiplayer, spawning. I remember facing an open field. Nothing special. The graphics were okay. Then I heard gunshots and a tank salvo, and I swear to God, my jaw dropped. It was like I was walking around with earplugs all my life, and finally someone removed them. You know what I mean? Like the sound was just so breathtaking. And this is like my question isn't very specific, so I don't know what kind of answer I'm going to get. But what set the sound in BFBC2 apart from games, of similar genre, in that era? Like remember you had other games out there like Call of Duty. There's all these different games out there, but BFBC2 was completely set apart from those games. It was at such a high level. Was it greater fidelity? What is it that you brought to that game that made it just sound that great?
Again, there's so many answers to that question. First of all, we had great source. All of our recordings and the material we had to work with was amazing. But again, that's nothing that sets us apart. There are many studios that go out and record, so it's about how they're played back. But I think the deepest message or the deepest core of separation from other games is still in the philosophy that we have about building audio worlds, like believable audio worlds, and allowing, you know, the war to really resonate inside the world that you're playing in. Like if you're out there on the battlefield and we let the guns and the explosions echo, and we allow stuff to be big, not necessarily big in each individual component, but the whole soup is awesome when it's together. So I'm really frustrated sometimes when I hear the single components, the building blocks of the game, because they are not that amazing. I tell you this for real, they're not that amazing, but they're balanced together with all the other components. And I think there's a common mistake in sound design is that you approach each individual building block like, I'm going to create this awesome explosion here. And then you go on and creating an awesome explosion, and then you go on to create an awesome gun, but you never balance them with each other. But that's what we did with almost every single component. So, because otherwise we would dilute ourselves in portraying power. So, like, if you make the biggest gun, the handgun, to be as big as you would have wanted it to be by itself, you would then dilute the power of the tank gun. So we've balanced all the things to be, this has to be the biggest and this is the smallest, but they still couldn't be pea shooters, so they still need to be powerful within that world. But I think we're just keeping consistency towards that, what is a great achievement for us. But I think a common misconception is that people think that you make awesome individual sounds, but that's not the case for us. It's to make the whole that was the challenge, and that's what I think we really delivered on as well. So I think, and that's what the players hear. It's like they hear everything, and I mean there are several different answers to this. I could go on taking a completely different angle on this question, but that's one takeaway that I would like for people to be aware of, that it's a decision that we took, that we are not making each individual component awesome. Even though they are, some of them, by themselves, they're all balanced towards each other. Because in sound, everything is relative. Like everything is relative to the other sound. Like that's like music, and that's like harmonies.
Imagine you had like a bathtub with water in it, and there was a sound. In other words, let's say, for example, I dropped a stone in the bathtub and it makes waves. I'm imagining the game like that. If you drop a stone or a pebble in the water, it would make a wave. In many games, there's a few waves and then they stop. In your game, it's almost like all the waves hit the sides of the bathtub and reflect back. You know what I mean? Like there's this wash, and you don't see that in a lot of games. It must take a tremendous amount of computing power to keep all those waves going. I guess is.
Yeah, I mean, we have some really good solutions there, technical solutions. Of course, I really have to give some credit to our engineers and the backbone of the Frostbite engine. Yes, there is a lot of computing power going on, but there are several things that provides the listener with the experience. So it's not only the source, then it's the HDR mixing, and then it's our master unit which has different compression setting that makes you hear the stuff at all times. But I can go into that later. No, but in terms of computing power and echoes, I think a lot of games, and there's been a lot of talk about this especially when making shooters, is that a lot of sound designers, they concentrate on the actual bang, and they know there's a tail. When you fire a gun in a certain environment, there's a tail. And in a recording, usually the tail is extremely low. Like it's minus 30 decibel from the actual bang, because the bang is so loud. But what we've done is tilted that balance a lot. So the reflection in our game is played back much louder than in many other games. And I think that also sets us apart, because here's the thing: you play back a war game, a shooter, and by nature a bang is a really loud thing. So, and we said, but if you only play back the bang, you still play it at comfortable levels. You play it on a TV, or you don't play it as loud as it is in real life. That would be extremely horrible to play it.
Yeah.
So what we did instead is amplify the tail, because that's something you can experience, and it's also softer on the ear, and it's longer, so the player can really hear it. So if you fire in a forest in Bad Company 2, the reflection of the forest is quite loud in comparison to the shot as well, or they're balanced out, especially compared to other games, which I think play them back at -20, and there's an ambient playing, and there's a lot of other sounds. So usually the tails, they just drown by. But our tails are really loud, and I think that's what makes the game convincing, even if you play it at lower amplitudes.
You just explained something. You just explained something to me, because when I'm in Battlefield, Bad Company 2, I fire a very powerful gun. Just as in real life, it'll take a little while for my hearing to readjust. It takes it's such a shock on your ears. My ears would take a little while to start being able to pick up the very light sounds around me. That happens in this game, and this is what freaks me out, because it's so realistic. And and I think it's because of what you just said. You're playing back the tails so loudly. I still can't hear my footsteps or something.
So we exaggerated that a lot, and I think if you go indoor, there's a reverb indoor, and it's extremely exaggerated. I think we actually played it a little bit too loud, but then we noticed that when you play it back on lower volumes, you still want to hear that you're indoor. And we were like, let's not fiddle with, fine-tuned, calibrated reverbs. Let's just really say to the player, you're indoor. It's this loud. Like, it echoes really loud. Right. It's super exaggerated, but it's saying you're inside.
No, it works
instantly.
It works. I mean, what a difference in the old days of video gaming. I remember how simple things were. You had looped, pre-recorded samples playing every time there was a need for a sound effect. The game soundtrack was recorded usually using a 16-voice polyphonic synthesizer back in the 80s. I remember that on my sound card. There's a huge difference, I guess, between those days and today's approach. You still play back authentic sounds, I imagine. You record them, but on the PC platform, how do those sounds get recorded? Are you recording them as waves? Are you recording them as pulse coded, modulated sounds? I mean, how do you record them? What is a native sound?
We use different recording equipment for different types of content, and we use sometimes it's simple recorders, and we try to record in as high resolution as possible. But one of the key things that we do is also use pretty dirty material. Like we use high definition special low frequency content for your LFE and stuff like that, which is really intelligent but designed. But we also use like really dirty video camera noises a lot of the times.
Really?
So, and that's like we like high fidelity. We like high fidelity people who invest in high fidelity equipment. But we also embrace the fact that most people don't. Like there is of course an upgrade in people's technology at home, but still many people just play them back on a Samsung television or. And then how do you make your war sound convincing there? And we noticed that using video camera as an analogy for what penetrates the speaker is a better way of looking at it than thinking that it's going to be played back in a THX certified cinema, because that's never going to happen. So when we've tilted the game, I would say our game sounds awesome in a crappy on a crap TV. It also sounds awesome in a high definition super $100,000 setup. Of course, we work in those studios, but we don't fool ourselves and say this is how most people are going to experience it, because it's not. And that's so when you said, "Are we record the source?" Yes, a lot of it is nicely recorded, balanced, but a lot of it is also very, very just recorded from the hip. And a lot of those recordings I cherish the most, the things that I just was very, unscientific about recording. I was just in it. like these, when we are at these big military exercises here in Sweden, a lot of the times it's the crappiest recorder recording the most violent thing that makes it to the game, not the stationary microphone that was balanced nicely. It's the unexpected sounds from the crappiest recorders that still surprises me the most, and that sounds more authentic to what I think people see today from conflicts all over the world.
I saw that you were at that. There was a Swedish military war game? I'm not sure if that was part of one of the NATO exercises that happens in southern Sweden. This was in 2010 that you went?
Yes.
In 2010, yeah. So it was probably joint action or one of those things that they have in southern Sweden every year. But you took part in that exercise, and I think I saw a video of you crouched at an intersection somewhere, waiting for an ambush or something. What were you trying to accomplish there? Were you trying to record individual sounds, or were you just trying to figure out, how these sounds worked, in the environment? What were you trying to accomplish?
The latter there, I would say. I mean, it's easy for us to go out and record a proper gun stationary with a scientific approach where we just want the perfect foundation for a gun, and we've done that several times. That's easy, I would say, or not easy. Don't underestimate. That's a craft in itself. But I always get more value or bang for the buck when recording the real thing, like when you're in. This is as close as you can get to being in a real conflict without being killed. Being in those big military exercises, we are there as civilians, and we're carrying mobile recorders with us, and then we have some stationary setups, and we try to position ourselves differently, all of us, like in different positions, and then just try to both be as close as possible or as far away as possible. But what we accomplish there is both being there, like the thing we talk about when we go in the car back to the studio about what we experienced that's one big takeaway for us.
Right.
That we can go like, did you notice that when the tank was behind that building, I actually couldn't hear this, and this? Oh, but did you hear that there was this thing happening when he shot over there, and I was standing by that barrel over there? You share stories with each other in that car back home when you go back, and you reevaluate and readjust your truths about sound. And then you listen to the recording, and they might concur with what you just experienced, or they might not. They might be really weird and like, what's this thing happening here? Oh, it's something bouncing off that wall over there.
What was the biggest surprise for you in this exercise? Did you find something?
Apart from being really scary, you feel really small and intimidated when you're close to a 60-ton tank and these angry men. in military equipment shouting. I think one of the big it's loud up close, but it's not as loud just a couple of meters away. You can actually take your earplugs off. It's not that loud. Like it dies, like gunfire travels a long way, but it quickly becomes quite soft on the ear, I would say, which is a surprise to me. I thought it was going to be, since it's that loud and it really hurts your ear on the 10, 15, 20 meters, I don't know. But then at 30 to 50 meters, you can take off your earplugs and listen. And then also noticed when someone is firing, like when someone is firing away from you, like the sound pressure is actually traveling in the direction of the firing. So we noticed that a lot of bass is actually disappearing when someone is not aiming at you. But when you're aimed at, there's a lot of bass pressure coming your way. I didn't think that the difference would be that big. That was one of the things we reevaluated. I mean, that's a minor tweak. No one would probably notice that in the game.
Unless you've ever been shot at in real life. I don't.
Yeah. I mean,
it's good to know.
I didn't know that the actual angle of the gun made that big of a difference. But we had a fast firing MG3 firing away from us, and that was much thinner, and I could just hear the high frequency content, but I couldn't hear the bassy bangs. But then as I stood in front of it, I didn't hear the high frequencies. It was more of just the physical bangs hitting me. So, and I mean, so that's there can be scientific truths, but then you make a game, and then you start noticing stuff like single player versus multiplayer, for example. In multiplayer, people they fire. There's intelligence in how people fire because they are human beings. So when you hear someone firing in the multiplayer, it's a person trying to aim at another person. So there's intelligence in the actual pattern, and that's subtle cues. You might think, oh, it's just sounds, but when you play single player, you immediately hear that that's not humans firing, because we fire as humans, and then we reevaluate the position, we take a new tactic, whatever we adjust. Like you fire at someone running into a house, and then you might, you fire at the window, and you don't see him anymore, so you move a little bit, and then you see him in another window, and then you fire there. I mean, that's the little story there in the sound, and that's a pattern of firing that just happened. But then in single player, we have AI, which is extremely hard to do, convincing, and getting those stories in there is extremely hard, because you know how good it sounds in multiplayer. So multiplayer, in that sense, will always sound better than single player in that particular aspect. I mean, in firing patterns, because that's humans, and that's, you can't get that with AI. You can get close, but you can't get that exact those mini narratives that are in there, and that's why I also think you believe it when you hear it there in
the rhythms,
multiplayer.
the rhythms.
It sounds real because someone is firing it.
Yeah, it's amazing listening to you describe this, because basically you're saying, you're listening to the just close your eyes and listen to the multiplayer, and it sounds different than an AI, because in the multiplayer there's almost a rhythm. The rhythms and patterns indicate intelligence. Then again, if you ever watch me play, you're not going to find too much intelligence in the way I'm shooting a gun. So I'm just going to take your word for it. So I guess what I'm hearing is that every time I see a big budget game come out, invariably the sound department for the studio developing the game goes out and records new gun sounds. I've always wondered why the hell that is necessary, because for the average person like myself who's never fired a weapon and don't want to fire a weapon in real life, I wouldn't even notice the difference. But you guys go out and do that.
Exactly, and I mean, there are more that unites them than separates them. Like a bang is a bang, and most guns sound exactly the same, like they do. And there are minor things that separate them. It's caliber, which makes a bigger bang. Like a big caliber gun is a bigger bang, and the barrel length, and then it's the fire rate. Those being, if I'm being really crude, it's those things that separates the sounds, and then you can put small iconic mechanical identities to each gun. Yes, you can do that, and that's where you can be a little bit creative and construct something, or use the actual real source, which we do a lot of the times. But then sometimes that is not even enough. And then it's about what microphones you use. You can get different. I've said this so many times, there's no truth in audio, and there is, but there is only different ways of recording it. So I think it's good for people. Look, you might say, why do people go out and record it? It must already be recorded. But it's about going out and smelling it and being there. And, it's like if you're going to make a rally game, I think it's a good thing for the team to go out driving a car, so they have at least some perception of what it is. That's important. So if not, that is one reason. If not for any sound reason, that would be a reason just to go out and shoot. I think I'm really scared of guns myself, but it's still important for me as a designer to fire a gun and to be in the ballpark of a big military exercise. That's as you stick your head in there and you go, oh, it's not at all what I thought it would. It's not at all as I expected it to be. I thought the urban fighting was going to sound like the Heat scene but it doesn't. Like so, you know, you can people only relate to what they've seen in other media. So you better find out what the real deal is about, and then you can make your own. I would urge people to do that. Like, make your own truth. Like with the.
And it's interesting that you said that there is truth and not in audio recording, and I just brings back the thought in me listening to BFPC2 again. If I remember, there were 5 audio settings in BFPC2, all the way from small speakers, hi-fi, home cinema, headphones, and I think something called war tapes. And if you listen to it on, as I usually do, in headphones, and then you flip on war tapes, which I have to ask you where you came up with the name, why you called it war tapes. But what the heck was war tapes? Because when I put that on, the aggressiveness of the sound, it was a completely different experience. If I wanted to play the game, you know, and try to identify individual enemies or whatever, I would set it up on you know, headphones or home cinema with a 5.1 surround. But war tapes totally immersed me. What was the difference between, let's say, going from headphones to war tapes? What was war tapes?
Well, first of all, I want to answer that with an excuse to begin with, like how not to do it. Like, we shipped a game with a setting that we didn't tell anybody about what it was.
Yeah.
Like, and then so there was no explanatory text what it was, and that's really bad on our part that we didn't explain that. And it's so, yes, but of course in the context of different settings, we have just different. We have a master unit, which of course is, you set the dynamic range for. If you play the game loud at home in a home cinema, you put it on home cinema, the dynamic range is really big. Like, you would then then you have the biggest separations between the loudest sounds and the quietest sounds. But you still have the HDR, which is an active component in the software that would amplify softer sounds if there's nothing else going on. But home cinema is still like, if you play it back loud, that's where you should play it on. And then if you go back to a more comfortable level, you should use the default setting, which is a little bit more compressed. And then headphones, I think headphones is a little bit closer to home cinema, but it's a little bit brighter and a little bit bassier. I believe we did some EQ setting on that. And then war tapes and TV compressed, and then war tapes is like the bastard child of compression settings. We were big fans of a lot of, as I said, dirty recordings, and in trying to make the whole game sound like that, we said this is a really extreme setting, but it had something really valuable. It's like a loudness button, basically, on those 90s amplifiers. If you play the game at really low volumes, but you want to hear everything, then war tapes is your setting. But more importantly, I think it's an aesthetic setting. So it shouldn't be on that axis at all. It should probably be a separate button, I think, because it is an aesthetic setting that embraces, or how to say, translates the game into a sound of YouTubeism, I would say. Like where everything is exaggerated. Like, you feel like your ears are super sensitive to everything. It doesn't matter if it's loud sounds or if it's lower sounds. So it's like the film grain button that they have in Mass Effect, like on the picture quality. It's like it's a different way of some people don't like the film grain. I don't know. I think it's nice. And then I think War Tapes is nice if you're in for a quick fix and you just want to play for 15 minutes or so. But I think for a longer session it would be fatiguing. But it's nice to see. I think it's fun. I think it's good that we actually shipped with it, because it's an anomaly, but it shows that we could do stuff like that, and it's just there. Like, the purpose of it being there is a little bit unclear to me, but it was so cool sounding that we couldn't ship without it.
No, I'm glad you let it in. I'm glad you left it in. To me, it was very similar to, for example, the video in Battlefield Vietnam. If you remember, the video was very grainy. The sound in War Tapes, it gives the same feeling except in sound. It had that sort of verite sort of feel to it. It was really, really cool. The other thing I wanted to ask you was, like we talked about recording gun sounds and various other sounds in the game. One sound that freaked me out in Battlefield was the sound of a house collapsing. Is that a pure sound? How the hell did you make that sound? I mean, because I've heard that you mix other sort of weirder sounds in mixes and stuff like that. But how did you do the house?
That's a really good story about the houses and weird sounds being used of. Yes, I think we used animals in some cases, like there was a walrus in there and so on. Like when you want something big to fall down, it's an old, not the oldest trick in the book, but it's an old trick to use an animal saying, "Moo," or as a lion but a walrus is very good. It has the sensation of falling down. If you put it amongst the debris and the creaky, moany metal sounds, then you can hide stuff like that in there to tell, because that's a tonal story or a tonal element,
right?
Or tonal narrative within that specific sound. But when a house collapses, it's quite interesting because that's one of the first implementations of where we used camera shake from the sound engine. So the sound designers, we have control over the camera, and I think that's an extremely powerful ally to the sound. Is to, if you shake the camera in conjunction with the sound, it's twice you see you and if you play on an Xbox, you also have the rumble, and if those three things are synced. And that's what we did with the house, is that when you're in a house and it's about to collapse, we play like a pre-destruction sound. We shake the camera a little bit and we rumble the rumble pad. So it goes, and it shakes in your hands, and that's your cue for getting out of the house.
Right.
And that's all done by the audio. No other discipline was in there. And some effects, of course, falling down, some debris. And then you run out. And then as the building collapses, it's a secondary sound, and then even more camera shake is applied from the sound engine.
It's one of the more pleasurable sounds in the game. And now that I know that it's a walrus, it totally changes my.
I think it's in there. I'm not certain. We did because I was doing some trailer for the game at the time as we were doing that. So I think because I know I had some animals in that project, and I think we used that for the final house collapse as well. Some of those you can't hear. It's baked inside among the debris, but now it's there. You might be able to pick it out.
Yeah, there's something in that sound that resonated, I think, with human beings. I think it's not just a mechanical fall. I think there's something else in there. I'm not surprised to hear that there were animal sounds in there. I was going to ask about the shake. The camera shake, because you were talking about that. I was just watching Fault Lines, the 12-minute trailer for BF3. The fidelity of the sound in that trailer, even though I'm listening to it on YouTube, is still amazing. I'd buy the game just to hear the sound track for the game. Will the sound be as aggressive as it was in BFBC2? Are you looking for something else in BF3 that you didn't do in BFBC2?
I think both yes and no. Since Battlefield 3 is that's the real successor to Battlefield 2, which was to its core a PC game, which is a difference from Battlefield Bad Company 2, which was primarily developed for consoles. And now it's the other way around. So by embracing a more PC-ish game, where I know the PC community, a lot of them are playing in headphones, and they're gonna put in a lot of hours. We are gonna ship a game that's more balanced, and I would say yes, slightly less aggressive, but more correct and accurate in terms of portrait of reality, and we're leaving room, a little bit more room for key moments, and not pressing, we're not playing it on 11 at all times, I think. But we're still the same people. We still love how Bad Company 2 sounded, and we embraced the fact that that's that game, and now it's another game. But we need to we have a much better starting point in terms of balancing, because we had a long pre-production for the core of the game, like the sound of the weapons and that. So and that's being so it's gonna sound a little bit cleaner, but we are gonna hopefully ship with more aesthetical settings like war tapes and if some people, if you're a fan of that soundscape, you can probably push those buttons in this game to make it sound like BC2 if you're into that. But we've started on we have clean sounding guitars. If you like distortion, you can put it up yourself a little bit. That's what I want to say.
That's cool, because I love distorted guitar.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's still going to be a war game. Like, it has to be aggressive. Like, it's by nature a very aggressive thing. So I'm not saying that it's going to be neat and tidy. Oh, no. We're way beyond that point. It's a super convincing sounding game, but it's more balanced, and it's a little bit cleaner sounding, I would say. And that's been good for us to clean up, and then applying distortion to something that's already balanced, it's much easier. But in Battlefield Bad Company 2, it was hard to back down because a lot of the content were already pushed to the max. I don't know if that answers.
No, absolutely. It's no question. From what I can see in the trailers already, it seems like you've got a little bit more realism going for you, and in some ways, the soundscapes in BFBC2 almost gave me post-traumatic stress disorder. So I'm kind of glad you're coming back a little bit, but it's great to see that you're playing and giving the gamer options. Sometimes you don't feel the same way every time you play a game, and sometimes you don't feel like you want to really crank your Marshall amp to 11 all the time. So,
and I mean, isn't that what defines a PC gamer? The PC gamer, the first thing a PC gamer does when he starts a game is going into the options menu.
Exactly.
Whereas a console gamer, they push start game.
Yes, no, absolutely. We're all about the options. One last thing, and this is a bit of a pet peeve with me. In classic first-person shooter games, in the past, one of the key critical pieces of information was always enemy location. Where is the enemy? Where are they firing from? Usually, that information, was provided to you by sound cues, footsteps, the sound of somebody falling, mechanical noise, from a magazine entering a gun or whatever. All these sounds gave away the position of the enemy. And as a player, you could turn around, because you're limited in how much you can see in a game. You can't see all the way around. So lately, though, and I'm talking maybe the last 2-3 years at least, a lot of FPS games have shipped with certain pieces of that information missing from the sound information, and it's getting very tricky to spot where the enemy is. Usually because in the sound, if there's a gunshot, there's reverb, and reverb points you in the wrong direction to where the sound is coming from. And this is what kills me all the time: is footsteps. The enemy players' footsteps can't be heard. I'm not just talking about Battlefield, because in Battlefield the sound was really good. I can pinpoint gun noise, but I still couldn't hear somebody trying to knife me from behind, running up from. Was that a conscious decision, or are you trying to make it as realistic as you can?
Oh yeah, but this is a very good question, and it's one of the hardest and trickiest ones to answer, because there are, when you play, you can feel like you want to be fairly treated, and you want to have a fair chance of discovering someone coming up behind you. And we had some problems with that throughout the development of the footsteps, finding right balance there. And there are occasions where you are firing and the HDR is pushed up, and your gun is louder than anyone's footsteps. So if you're being stabbed from the back while firing, we can't give you have no excuse, like, because that you fired and you couldn't hear. We can't play footsteps on top of weapons. That would just tilt everything that we've built. We have to be consistent with our ladder of amplitude. So footsteps are not louder than guns. But yes, it's still a game, and if it's vital to the meta game that you want to be able to hear these things through everywhere, we can bypass the HDR should we like to. I don't really know if that's a solution. And then there is a problem of just performance. Sometimes, like footsteps, they're actually classified as a lesser important sound because weapons are still more important. Like, if you have to choose what's more important in a war game, weapons or footsteps, we would have to say weapons. And that's also what's happening sometimes. It might be the case that they're actually not playing because of performance, because the engine is pushing around a lot of sounds, and the sounds of the footsteps might be down prioritized. So that might have happened in one or two cases where you feel mistreated or sneaked up on. And then, so we also have, I mean, it's not just a footstep, it's a whole soldier. So we've added kit sounds, small jingling of, harnesses and kit. The kit that you're carrying also makes noise. It's not just the footsteps, it's the whole body of the soldier that needs to be heard. And I think it is a real problem in a loud game that sometimes you want to hear the less louder sounds. So, and that's how it would be in real life as well. So it's kind of part of the strategy. Like, if you're in a loud environment and you suddenly want to hear something that's lower played back loud, it would also, as I said, tilt everything. So if you play the footsteps as loud as the guns, then it would say to the player in a way that, oh, the guns aren't that loud because they are as loud as my footsteps.
Absolutely, I completely understand. And I think where I had objection was when you're in a room and there's no one firing and you still can't hear somebody coming up from behind. And
I mean, I know that has happened. It's unfortunate, and I really have no excuse for that. It's one of the trickier. I think in those cases the performance might be the problem, because we've tested that there is no problem with the amplitude. They are there, but I've experienced the same thing during playtest that sometimes those footsteps, someone coming up from behind, they seem to not play. So we should definitely take some actions on investigating that more. It's something that we are aware of this.
I hope you do, because I know that a lot of the PC players who are cynical by nature,
yes.
we tend to have that in our DNA. We jump to the conclusion, I know I do, that this is some sort of plot to try to make it easier for the noob player to come away with knife kills.
No such thing. I mean, when we test our game, we sit a lot on test ranges and we balance everything, and we make sure every sound is played. But then when you go in a server client environment, when sounds and players are, it might be that if there's a package loss on the server on the traffic between server and client, there might be like the server. I'm making this up because I don't know, but it might be that the server says that, oh, he's not here right now. He's 1 centimeter off, and then his foot plant doesn't play, and then there's no sound playing. I mean, there might be stuff like that under the hood. I really don't know, because we had really hard time replicating this during playtests. Right. It's just something that is reported at several times. Like I've heard it even a long way after shipping. So it's I know it's an issue, and it's going to be addressed, I hope.
Outstanding.
I'll
Stefan,
take it upon myself to address it.
fantastic. And
But for BC2, I don't know if we have any time to put on it. We are really stressed out about shipping Battlefield 3.
you have other things on your mind, right? Absolutely. And
yes.
And in fact, you're on your off day working, and I'm gonna let you get back to work so that you can meet those dates. I don't want to be the reason for you not to. So, listen, I had an amazing time talking to you. I've learned so much, and I hope the guys listening to this cast have as well. Stefan, I wish you the greatest success. Good luck with the new release. You know, your team is doing an amazing job. You guys are head and shoulders above what I've heard out there in gaming, and keep it up. You guys are amazing.
Yes, I also want to make sure that all of the guys that I'm working with get the credit for this. It's not a one-man job here. We're an amazing group of sound people. So amazing engineers on our side, and some amazing sound designers that work in here.
Outstanding.
So it's a team effort.
And hopefully we've opened the ears of a lot of people playing your game. Hopefully they'll recognize that there's a lot that goes into giving them that experience. It's not just the video; it's also the audio that's extremely important. And in my opinion, makes the game.
Yes.
Stefan Strandberg, thank you very much from DICE. I really appreciate it, sir.
Thank you so much.
Brother Bashers, Sister Slashers, thanks for listening to Bash. Come to our portal site, bashandslash.com, for more info on gaming. Join our boards and take part in our community. And remember, please support Bash by checking out our sponsors' links or by donating to Bash today. Thanks.
You've just been